Isn't it funny how we can explain how the brain works in detail, but yet we can't fully explain consciousness? Right now, awareness is present, not as a thought you selected, not as a reaction you decided on. It's kind of just there. It's forming the background of everything you notice, every memory you recall, every decision you make, and every sense of being yourself depends on this condition. Yet the moment we try to describe what it is, the explanation begins to slip. We can speak confidently about the brain, point to the region, signals, and its activity, but none of that tells us why awareness exists at all. Thanks to modern neuroscience, we now know how information moves through the brain, how damage alters our behavior, and also how chemistry shapes mood and perception. That's super important and solid, but they describe what it does, not what it is like to be in that system. A brain can process information without there being anyone home. Processing alone does not account for the presence of a self. The issue here becomes a lot clearer when two kinds of explanation are kept separate. One explains function and the other addresses awareness. Functional accounts describe how the brain receives inputs, stores memory, and produces action. They explain performance and behavior in measurable terms. But there is another question those accounts never reach, and that question is, why is there a consciousness at all? This account was first brought up by philosopher David Chalmers, introduced what he called the hard problem of consciousness. His claim was not that the brain is mysterious, it was that even a complete description of brain function would still leave something untouched. The fact that there is an inner point of view. A system could behave exactly like a human, respond to the world in the same way, and still raise the question of why there is someone there to experience it. Nothing in the physical description answers that. And that is what makes the problem so hard. Scientific explanation depends on external observation. It measures, compares, and builds models that can be shared. Well, consciousness doesn't appear externally. No scan reveals what pain feels like, no image shows how grief unfolds. You can associate reports with brain states, but association is not explanation. Awareness itself never becomes visible in the data, and that's not the failure of science. It's just a boundary built into the kind of explanation science provides. Another philosopher, Thomas Nagel, illustrated this boundary with a simple question. What is it like to be a bat? You can know every fact about a bat's biology. You can understand how it navigates and survives. That knowledge still does not tell you what it is like to exist as one. The missing access is not caused by ignorance. It comes from the fact that consciousness is tied to a point of view. And this is where Carl Jung, a psychoanalyst and a psychologist, adds a very important layer to this. Jung did not view consciousness as a static feature of the brain. He saw it more as something that developed over time, and it's shaped by memory, meaning, and what remains outside of awareness. This is where psychologist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung adds a very important layer. He didn't see consciousness as a passive feature in the brain. He saw it as something that developed over time with experience, shaped by memory, and what remained outside of awareness itself. So what this means is, he saw consciousness as not something predetermined, but something that needed to emerge after it began to recognize patterns, form identity, and reflect inward. Now this shifts the question. Instead of asking what consciousness is made of, it asks how a self takes shape within it. That's pretty confusing stuff. But if consciousness develops rather than appearing fully formed, then the self is not a fixed object. It is a structure that takes shape over time. Attention alters it, reflection refines it, interpretation gives it coherence. The self is not located in a single place in the brain. It is a way consciousness relates to itself. And that relationship cannot be reduced to activity alone. Really, any attempt to explain consciousness faces a final constraint. The explanation must take place within consciousness itself. There is no external vantage point from which awareness can be fully described. It's just the act of explanation is already part of the thing being explained. And that creates a rather interesting loop. Consciousness may not be a puzzle waiting to be solved. It may just be a condition that makes all puzzles possible. And the fact that it resists complete explanation, it kind of clarifies its role. Consciousness is not something we observe from the outside. It is the space inside our heads in which observation happens.